there are lots of people who don't spring out of bed, on a training morning thinking, yeah, I get a day back in a classroom and I get to drive 3 hours to get there, and not know what I'm going to have for lunch and have to ask to go to the toilet, and it's not a very fun place to be. So we've done an awful lot over the years as an industry to try and make it as engaging as possible, to get the learning to stick, to involve people in participating in their learning, not attending lectures.
Hello, welcome back to the InGear Media Podcast. I am Mackenzie, and I'm joined today by Tim English for a second time after a mammoth effort getting him on for a podcast before. I've got him back to do it again. So Tim, hello, welcome.
Hello. Can't get enough of it now.
You're back with it. Awesome. Well, we're going to be covering a number of topics today around learning and development, and particularly how it's changed over the past year with obviously all the developments of COVID and people being more remote, and training has to, of course, gone online a lot more. So lots of different things to get into. But I guess let's just start with a bit of an update about yourself, your business, what you've been up to. And of course, for anyone that maybe hasn't seen the last podcast, a general intro.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Tim English. I'm a learning and development consultant, but I also manage the GBB Coaching Consultancy training agency, essentially. So we have been operating for 12 years now, and we cover a whole range of topics and engagements, mainly communication based. Pretty much everything we do boils down to communication strategies, interdepartmental, business and customer communications. But whether that's influencing systems and processes, or whether it's really focused on the training element and the skills of staff, but most projects are a blend of all of those things.
Awesome, cool. And I think I'll go straight in with the first question then. Screen time is such a big thing that a lot of people talk about in this space at the moment. And obviously we're looking at screens more and more than ever. So I'd love to start by just getting your take on what you think is the right amount of screen time. Obviously, we're talking more in the realms of training and development at the moment. So yeah, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic. And I don't know that I subscribe to the general view that we should be limiting screen time, or probably more accurately that we should be worrying about screen time. I think, you need to take aside any medical concerns. I'm absolutely not qualified to, talk about the effect on your eyesight and those sorts of things. But in terms of engagement and how long should people be on screens, and what is good for them mentally and those sorts of things. I was in a really interesting conversation on LinkedIn with somebody just recently where they were posting, it was more of a personal thing about kind of teenage children, and we're just losing that, they're on their screens all the time, and we're trying to put these rules in place that they're not allowed to look at their phones after 6 p.m. and they're not allowed them during dinner time, and now they're kicking back that we're the worst parents in the world, and all these sorts of things. And there were thousands of comments on there. My point was, and I apply it to everything that we're doing with so much screen time now, is it's not the screen that's the problem. The screen isn't bad. That doesn't matter whether it's a mobile phone, whether it's a laptop, whether it's a computer screen. It's what you're doing on it at that point. So on that more sort of social interaction, how much time do we want people staring at screens? With my I've got teenage children, and we have all those same battles. But my point is, why don't you ask what somebody's actually doing? If somebody is looking at their phone during dinner, the instant reaction is that's rude. You shouldn't do it. That's where society's falling apart because we can't have dinner together without all looking at our individual phones. But actually, if we're in a conversation and I'm looking up, a fact to put into that conversation, or we've been talking about a movie and we're trying to remember what the song is, and somebody's then looking up the song to. That's all part of how we interact these days. We have all this great information at our fingertips on these screens. So long as you're looking at something interesting and useful and something that's part of that interaction, that's great. But actually, we also can't embrace the technology when it suits us and not embrace it when it doesn't. So the idea that we should turn our phones off once it hits 6 o'clock, when they are specifically designed to be with us 24/7, we're contactable all the time. Lots of people don't even use a landline anymore. So then if somebody texts me, why wouldn't I text back? If I'm trying to sort something out for the business and it's, run into the evening, great that I don't have to go and unlock the office and sit down and fire up my computer and do that thing, that I can do it on a phone, even if we are watching TV at the moment. So I think it's really important to ask, what is somebody actually doing on their screen? And if it's something that's useful and engaging and part of a wider communication strategy, then what is the problem with it? So when a client says to me, we don't want people on the screen for any more than 60 minutes, I say, well, I wouldn't want them on the screen for 30 minutes if they weren't doing something useful. But why would you have an issue if they were on the screen for 3 hours, if they were getting some really genuine learning from it? And that isn't really any different than when we were not doing so much work on screen and we were looking at live events and we were talking about a training day, and you have that arbitrary, well, we want it to start at 9 and finish at 4. Well, why? Well, if we've only got 3 hours worth of content, why do we want to drag it? Well, we don't want them to travel for half a day. So can you make it a full day? Well, yeah, of course, we'll find something interesting and engaging and useful for people to do. Or you could give them their afternoon back. Or you could bring somebody else in to do something with the afternoon. Don't ask us to spin it out. Equally, I think what we're much better at now is, if somebody said, well, it must finish at 4 o'clock, and we said, but really, we've got an extra half hour's content, you'd either be in a battle to get people to stay later than they expected, or you'd end up jamming some of that content together, probably losing some of the impact of it to get it all covered in that allotted amount of time. Now we've got far more options to say, yeah, absolutely, we can run 9 till 4 face-to-face, and then we can do a piece online, or we can catch up for just an hour with people, on a call, get that group back together the next week, check in with them, see how they're going up for half an hour, and then, add that missing half hour's content that we didn't have time for in the classroom. So I think the screen time is brilliant, but it should be appropriate. I don't think there is any right or wrong amount of screen time. Now, equally, there's some great guidelines, of course, and we'd say if we've been working for an hour on the screen, we should take a 5-minute break, but we should make that a really strict 5-minute break. So, probably breaking up into slightly smaller chunks, but I don't mind how many of those chunks there are, so long as what we're doing together is engaging and useful and keeping the whole group involved. Then I think an arbitrary hour, 2 hour, 90-minute cap on online sessions says more about your content than it does about the on-screen experience.
Nice. I like the earlier point, and it's almost a bit like in social media. We have this debate about social media making the world more negative, and I often think it's actually not. It's just social media has given negative people the tools to have a bigger reach. Because everyone's more connected. It's not the tool that's wrong, it's the people using it most of the time, or that sort of minority.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think, we've missed such a trick, haven't we? Because in social media, people are drawn to that negativity. I mean, they love it, they feed off it, and there's all kinds of things wrong with that. But it just makes me think, before we had that, everybody thought you had to be a motivational speaker. Probably could have made a fortune going out there being negative and miserable. People would have paid twice as much to come and see that, judging on how they flock to social media to be negative and miserable together. Yeah. I think that's exactly what we should have done with our lives.
Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea. Yeah, but yeah, it always gets the most comments and what have you. Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting point. So if you was putting something together then in a training environment, you wouldn't necessarily sort of have a set time before every break. But I guess what I would say, do you find people burn out a bit quicker, or they might get tired any quicker than they would in the classroom, or would you say it's about the same?
I don't think we've found that. Now, equally, I would probably have to say that our virtual sessions are shorter than our classroom sessions, because you have taken out some of the natural kind of chit chat. The breaks, as I say, have become much shorter because people are in their own environment. They're not all breaking together. You're not in a conference center where you and 10 other classrooms have all broken for coffee at the same time, and there's a queue for the coffee and a queue for the toilet. And you've got to give people 15, 20 minutes to do that. Now you can have a 5-minute break. Everybody gets up, goes to their own toilet, their own kettle, and is back in 5 minutes, ready to go again. So our overall length of of a course has come down, but it's really the breaks that have got less, because we don't need them for people, because we're being really engaging online. We're making sure that everybody's involved. They're doing things, not just listening. They're not watching TV for 4 hours straight. They are involved in a live, one-to-one, engaging training session. The fact that they're the only person in the room really doesn't factor into whether it's going to be interesting or not.
That's good. It's a really nice way of looking at it. So I guess that leads nicely into then comparing again. We're obviously going to make comparisons from real world to virtual classroom. In the real world, you've obviously got your presentation. You've got flip charts. You're sticking stuff on walls. People are writing on things. Whatever, all the different activities that we've seen and used over the years. What tools have you found work well, and what do you tend to implement to keep people engaged in those online environments?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and it's one, of course, that clients are interested in. Well, hey, how are we going to make this interesting? I would say that there's a couple of ways to look at that question, actually. One of the reasons that we need that amount of stimulation in the classroom environment is that just that very environment holds often some quite negative connotations for people, whether they really realize it or not. Not everybody enjoyed their schooling. Even if they enjoyed being at school with their friends, that classroom environment does not suit everybody. We know that is one of the big flaws in education systems around the world, is that, it's very much one size fits all. So there are lots of people who don't spring out of bed, on a training morning thinking, yeah, I get a day back in a classroom and I get to drive 3 hours to get there, and not know what I'm going to have for lunch and have to ask to go to the toilet. Actually, it's not a very fun place to be. So we've done an awful lot over the years as an industry to try and make it as engaging as possible, to get the learning to stick, to involve people in participating in their learning, not attending lectures. So a lot of that is gone. We don't have to worry so much about that. Actually, what do I do within my day-to-day role? An awful lot of people spend a good amount of time sat at their desk looking at their computer screen. So I'm not really taking you to a very alien environment, but it's going to be way more interesting than staring at a spreadsheet all day. And actually, even if I'm in a direct customer-facing role, yeah, exactly. And if I'm in a direct customer-facing role, well, actually, a lot of people will relish a little bit of a break off that front end for a session. So we have a much more positive reception once people start to realize that when they're coming to a virtual session, they haven't got the travel, they haven't got the time away, they haven't got that extended day. They're not in such a controlled environment. At the end of the day, at any point, they could just turn me off and walk away from their desk. So it's up to me to engage them at this point. So we've already overcome quite a lot of the hurdles that meant that we really needed all that interactivity to keep people engaged in the classroom, make it not feel like school, all of those sorts of things. And then in terms of the learning techniques within there, really we can replicate all of those online now. I mean, there is not much that we would do in a classroom environment that we're not able to do virtually. And as I said before, a lot of it now feels more comfortable than it did in the classroom for people. We work a lot with actors for role plays, and we do that because it's really effective at embedding learning and allowing people to explore a new technique in terms of their communication. Understandably, people are nervous about that. They don't enjoy, even when it's finished, they often say, I didn't enjoy that, but I do recognize how much I've just learned, and it really will stick with me. But it sticks with me because, oh my God, it wasn't an enjoyable experience in that role play. Now the feedback that we're getting is, I was really nervous going into it, but actually it was just a conversation. I didn't move. I was sat at my own desk where I'm comfortable. Okay, somebody new came on the screen and I had a conversation with them, and then my trainer popped back up and the rest of the class popped back up in the other windows. And we talked about how that conversation went and what we did with it, but it didn't feel nearly as nerve-wracking as when I had to get up and go to the front of the room and sit down opposite an actor and everybody else was there watching me. all the rest of it, we've managed to make that experience just as valuable, but even more comfortable. But back to the screen time point, what it doesn't do is run any quicker. We're still going to have, 10 5-minute conversations plus feedback. That's an hour and a half session right there. So even if you were only going to do an hour's input on the technique and then have that hour and a half practice session and then have half an hour reflection and action planning, we've completely busted your, no one must sit in front of a screen for more than 75 minutes because that's our new company policy. So if you're coming to us and asking us to embed some new behaviors in people, we say we can absolutely do it virtually, but that being virtual hasn't made it quicker for the bit that we do, but it has made it way quicker in terms of the travel, the coffee breaks, the toilet stops, the networking, the getting everybody comfortable in the room. All of that stuff is loads quicker and easier to do online.
Yeah, it's quite good, because I think even with the delegates that I've trained in my sessions, it's very easy to jump to thinking of why people might dislike it, but so many of them have commented, this is great. I'm in, like you say, I'm in the comfort of my own home. I don't have to travel everywhere. And, so many people travel to a central location or training center for most brands and companies, don't they? So, some of them have got a long way to go. So it does really help in that sense.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of industries, and certainly the automotive industry that both you and I work in regularly, Mac, there was a time, we're probably going back even to sort of the 1980s, maybe still in the 90s, where you had those big sales conferences, and everybody got flown off somewhere for a vehicle launch, and it was about reward and recognition, and it was great fun. And people from that era have always got the most outrageous stories of the things that went on those events, and all of that has gone for lots and lots of good reasons. But the training departments took the place of that in a lot of cases. That was where everybody got together, was able to network, find out what's going on in other parts of the company, met people from other branches, all of those sorts of things, swapped war stories, and there was an element of, if you've got a 2-day course and so you've got a night in a hotel, there was a lot of value in terms of the engagement of people and the relationship building that went into those networking elements. Now, that I think is going to be missing from these online environments because of the screen time argument, again, that you started with. And I think it was a really good place to start because it's impacting so much of what we're doing at the moment. We're not building that networking into these online forums because there is the feeling that we should do it as quickly as possible and get people off the screen and back to their job, where they'll probably be on a screen. Yeah. So, I can envisage a future where the training has become much more focused on the learning outcomes, which arguably it should be anyway. But the additional benefits of getting people together could be missing from that virtual training world. They're certainly missing from the e-learning drive, which is very different to virtual training. And so I can see those company conferences potentially even coming back, that people say, well, you know what, we're hitting all our learning points, but we do still need to engage people. We do still need to get them to socialize, mix, share best practice, put things back together. And that as that is allowed again, maybe we see the rebirth of the reward and recognition program, the company conference, that feeling of going away and building relationships rather than having to only go away when we've got something that we need to tell people or train people, and we wrap them all together, because the training can be delivered more efficiently remotely, and that could potentially free up budget to then really reward people and feel like you've invested in them as an individual, rather than, well, we sent you on a training program, the recognition of how much that costs in terms of hotel, accommodation, food, even when you're not trying to do anything special for people. That's a huge chunk of the company's budget. And then they're not necessarily linking the rewards from that. So I think those two could get separated out again, and I don't think that would be any bad thing.
Yeah, I quite like the sound of that, because I agree. You really do miss that kind of the chats just before and just after and during breaks that you have on these types of days. But yeah, the conferencing, it almost helps cement culture in a way, doesn't it, in a business, getting everyone together like that and
Mm.
being able to interact. So that's really good. Well, we never know. We shall see. All right. Well, then we've kind of established our training course. We've delivered it. It's all gone really well. And I know as a company for you, it's always important to kind of think what the end goal is and work backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So how does measurement work? Has it changed much? If it's changed, how has it changed in this sort of new environment that we're in?
I think, at a very base level, level one of how did today go, a measurement of the training rather than the outcome. There's clearly a change. We are saying to people, how was the experience online? And what you can't see as easily in that feedback now is exactly what's going on. You get a much more mixed picture. Now, it makes sense. It's no great mystery, but previously, if you went to a training center with 10 people and the heating had broken, and the sandwiches were horrible, you got a low score for the training venue and the training environment, and everybody gave it a low score, and you fed that back to the training venue. Now, of course, you can have a really mixed bag, because if one person is having problems with their internet or problems with their microphone or whatever, they will have a really poor experience on that day, and they'll say, well, this is awful, and I hate online learning, and the platform's rubbish, and it doesn't work. And other people in the group will have had a fantastic experience, possibly even enhanced by the fact that 3 of the people in the group couldn't even say anything today because their microphones weren't working. And I got loads of one-to-one time with the trainer, and I got to answer all the questions and be in all the role plays, and I had a brilliant time. So it's harder to see that, because actually each person is responsible for much more of their own experience now. So that I think is one of the things that we've seen clearly, but it's harder to know what to do about. And that is just about infrastructure, and all industries go through this when they are changing over to new technologies. Does it happen in one fell swoop? Do you have people who are at different levels at different points? And I think it will gradually iron itself out. Of course, it's impacted right now in January 2021 by the fact that in the UK we're still in a lockdown situation, so a lot of people are having to join training courses from home. So they're not necessarily set up with the full broadband speed. They're also homeschooling their kids who are all on Teams, and there's somebody else in the house who isn't working at all at the moment and is streaming Netflix upstairs. And so even if they've got half decent broadband, it's being hammered at the moment all day, every day in people's houses. Yeah. So you can have a really varying experience for people right now. That's a challenge, but I think it's quite a temporary challenge. In terms of measuring the impact of the training, again, I would say arguably it's easier now, because we're able to catch up more readily and more regularly with people post-training. So nothing to do with being in the virtual world, but so long as you have designed your training intervention with an end goal which is measurable, and you've identified the key performance indicators in the business that will be directly affected by this training, I would say that really should be done for the individual rather than the company overall, simply because of how difficult it will be to measure at a company-wide level and be able to say the training had that impact. But if the individual has a measure, and whether that is about a conversion ratio, whether it's about a retained profit level, whether it's about a customer interaction score, which is taken in a robust method, get the individual to think about the skill that they've just been looking at, how they would implement it, and which of their KPIs would be improved by putting that in place. If you capture that, now it's so easy to get that person back in the classroom and go, how's that going? Because the classroom is their desk. The classroom is just a video call now. And we're straight back into that same environment. And I can say that you told me 3 weeks ago that if you could go back and put this in place, you thought it would impact this measurement. How's that going? Have you put it in place, and have you seen the change that you wanted? And now let's have a conversation about what that might be. So the follow-up coaching to help people implement the learning, I think is a lot easier, Therefore, seeing the impact is easier. So the measurement hasn't changed, but actually being able to get to those people and find out what the score is easier now that people are embracing these sorts of virtual interactions much more readily and much more easily.
You went towards a little bit there, you know, the IT technical issues and how much that can have an influence on it for people, of course. You know, I know even having good broadband here that there's certain days when it's just, like you say, getting hammered. It makes a difference on the work that we're doing. But when it comes then to the platform that you're delivering on, have you found a preference there, or ones that perform better than others?
Yeah, we have. It's interesting though, because I think there's two sides to this argument. We have a preference of a platform as an agency to deliver virtual classroom, and that's Adobe Connect. Part of that is the functionality of the system. When we look at almost anything that we do in the classroom, there is a way to deliver it in an engaging way on Adobe Connect. You've got to take your time to know the system. You've got to keep up to date with the various updates on it. You need to have a good partner in terms of who you have licensed it through and who's supporting the system for you. But if you train your people and you take an interest in the platform itself and how you're delivering on it, it becomes a really versatile and engaging tool. So there was a point in time where we were saying we work on Adobe Connect because we know that we can get the right result. And with some clients that worked really well. And with others, we ran into a problem that we hadn't foreseen and we perhaps should have done, which was if it wasn't a system that they were actively using in other parts of the business, and we were saying, well, it doesn't matter because we have the system, we have the license, you're just logging on to our license, so anybody can join from anywhere. That was okay. But if they were joining through a larger corporate IT system, VPNs, firewalls, settings on company laptops could really have an impact on that user experience and on the day as a whole. So if you have got a company who are supporting Adobe Connect as part of their wider training platform rollout, that's great because the laptops will have been set up properly by the IT department. The app will have been downloaded and tested. And if anybody does run into problems on the day, they can call their IT support and they'll get some help to get that loaded properly. So clients who are already supporting it, it's brilliant. But we had a couple of clients who said, we don't mind what platform you use because really we haven't got anything for it. We're using Teams for meetings or we're using Zoom or whatever it might be. And we said, well, they're really not training platforms. They're meeting platforms. It's not where we would want to work. And they said, that's absolutely no problem. But then when we ran into those IT issues with people on the day, there's only so much you can do externally. We don't expect our facilitators and trainers to do that. We have our own IT support who are online helping people, introducing, almost acting like room hosts in the way that you would have at a training center, that there would be somebody at reception, a facilities manager, and we have those people in the background sorting those problems out so that the trainer can just deliver the great training because that's their job. But there is only so much you can do if you start coming up against company firewalls, VPN issues, limited broadband, no dedicated lines for training, those sorts of things. And if the client doesn't support that, you've got nowhere to go on the day. So at that point, there were a couple of instances where we said, you know what, we've made a mistake here. We forced our preferred platform on a client. And what we should have done is said, where do you want to work? Where are your people comfortable? And we'll find a way to make it work. And if there's a real barrier to something that we want to deliver, then we'll have to flag that. We'll challenge it back, or we'll have to do the work up front, with Adobe Connect to get it installed and to provide a higher level of IT support, and potentially even coming on site and helping people set it up ahead of the training. But that's sort of defeating the object of working remotely. If you're then going to send an IT person on site, why don't you just send the trainer on site? So, there's a balance to be struck there. But I think my twofold answer is Adobe Connect is our preferred training platform, unless it isn't yours as the client.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, obviously I've used it as part of working with you guys, and you can see there's a lot of good options in there, and the interactive elements, it all works really nicely. So okay, the other kind of part of it, we've kind of gone quite in depth with the tools and the actual sort of formats, I guess, but do you think there's an ideal number of delegates to have in an online course? Because I certainly feel that there's a difference between when I have 4 or 5 and when I have 12. The day works a bit differently, and trying to sort of manage everyone, for me, I find is quite different. So what's the ideal number for you? Is there an ideal number?
I think, again, it's a difficult question to answer, because the question almost requires us to consider that training only means one thing, and of course it completely changes on the topic, the behavior, the skill, the culture, of the participants. So difficult to answer in absolute numbers, but probably the more important thing to define with a client at that point is, have we got some common language around this new virtual world? Because I'm hearing people referring to, I've just done a training session for 90 people. And you go, well, you haven't, have you? You've talked at a camera, and there may or may not have been 90 people listening. You absolutely haven't just run a training session for 90 people.
That's a long introduction session.
Yeah, exactly. and that point is exactly the one. You're not in a training session if you've got no idea who you're working with and why they're here and what their objectives are, and you've had no opportunity to express your specific objectives to the course leader. You are not in a training session. You might be in a lecture, and that might be absolutely the right thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing it. We may have, a new policy that we need to quickly inform everybody about, or a breakdown somewhere, or, a hold up in the supply chain, and we want to get, a senior person from the executive team to get on camera in front of our staff and say, guys, you are going to have a horrendous day today. Our customers are going to be furious. This is what's happened. This is what we need you to tell them. And so that might be absolutely the right thing to deliver it to everybody at once. But you didn't train them. You were just delivering a message.
Yeah.
And you've got no idea what those people as individuals are going to go away and do with that message, and you've had no way of checking the understanding of each individual. So you didn't just run a training session.
Yeah.
And if you can deliver to 90 people, you can deliver to 600 people in that format. So I think there definitely becomes a tipping point. And I personally would say, from virtual training is no different to classroom training. I think 12 is a perfectly reasonable number to have on a virtual training course. I think 16 is doable on a virtual training course, but you must have written the program for 16. And if you've written a program for 16, it won't run well with 10. Yeah. So that I think is where I'm coming from. If you've written the program for 6 and you've got 10, it's going to be a nightmare. So I think that's where you've got to be. Again, this is all about planning, and proper resourcing of training administration departments and training managers, planning the rollout in the right way. And if we're writing for 8 to 12 people, really you need to be aiming for 10 on every program. So I think it's really enjoyable with the program that's been written for 8 and 8 people online with you. So I think that's my ideal number for my own enjoyment as a facilitator. But so long as the program's been written correctly, I'm happy with 6 and I'm happy with 12, and I could work with 16. But once you get over that, I would say I think I'm going to struggle to train these people today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see that, because it does just get very full on trying to manage.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm not going to be able to keep everybody engaged. If you're getting up to 20 people, even if I can have all the cameras on and I can see, with a lot of the systems now, you can see up to 25 people on screen as a facilitator. But what do you do about what you're seeing? If I see somebody start to look not so engaged, but that picture has become very small on the screen now, they're not live in a classroom with me. Are they checking their phone? Are they picking their nails? Are they actually in a full text conversation with somebody else? Can I tell from the way that they're looking, whether they're actually looking in the camera, whether they're actually looking at a spreadsheet that they've opened up over the top of the training now and they're just listening in? It becomes harder and harder and harder once you get to those bigger numbers, just simply because the camera is so small now, the image. So to do my job really well and engage all those people, I've also got to be hearing from all of them regularly. Well, with 25 people, if I throw a question out there, if I'm going to present for 5 or 6 minutes on a topic before I get people into some groups and doing some activity, how am I going to call out 25 people to give an opinion? It's just going to take too long. So most of the good training engagement practice that we would use in the classroom that we're now using online, it's just a matter of time. Can I get round everybody regularly? So we do have some tips and tricks with that we will work with a printed delegate register of who is supposed to be in here today. And as a trainer, I'll have that in front of me and I'll be ticking off, yeah, I've got everybody here, but then I'll have all the sessions that I'm going to be covering today. And I'll be, just making a little check mark. Have I heard from this person on this topic? And if I didn't hear from that person on this topic, I'm going to ask them specifically about the next topic. So when I introduce the next learning point, I'm absolutely going to call you out and I'm going to say, Mackenzie, tell me a little bit about how that would affect you in your day-to-day work. And you'll think, oh God, I wasn't listening. So let me shut this spreadsheet and turn my volume back on.
I quite like as well in Adobe Connect, you can see when you put a poll up who's voted and who's not on something. And it's a great way just to go, right, such and such hasn't said anything for a while. And I'm the same, I'll call them out. Yeah. And you probably hear a bit of a fumble. And that, what was that?
That's it. And you don't have to do that very much before people start thinking, oh, I'd better listen because they're going to talk to me. And those are the things, again, back to your earlier question about what's the ideal amount of time on screen. If that's not happening, you're going to have to be really interesting to not start to lose me after 15 minutes. If my only option is to sit here and listen to you, and you haven't even got a very interesting visual for me to look at, then I really will start to just listen and I'll start to look for other visual stimulation around me. And I might actually be listening, but you're going to end up with very little body language, very little presentation. You are just going to be talking. So at that point, 15 minutes, maybe you'll start to lose people. But if I'm being involved, if I know that I'm going to be asked a question about this, if somebody's telling me how it's relevant to me, but making me do the work to make that relevance real and have an example ready in case I'm the one who gets asked, now I'm engaged.
Yeah.
And 15 really minutes goes like this. We're on to the next topic, and now we're taking a 5-minute break and we're coming straight back and we're starting again and we're going to be on to another, tool that's going to really help you. And this time I want you to, get something out of your desk and I want you to find a specific example. All of those things will engage somebody, not in the screen, but will engage them in the training.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. It works really well. It's just, like you say, keeping them engaged the whole way through. All right. So I guess it kind of leads on a little bit, but if, so many people now, we're all on Zoom calls, we're all on Skype or Teams, everyone's got their own platforms and having to kind of give presentations over that way. And we've talked quite a bit about, I guess, learning and development environments directly. But do you have any kind of insights that you can give us to help people just deliver a better pitch online when it comes to, delivering over this newer format that, you know, I say it's new. We've been doing it for over a year now, quite regularly, haven't we?
Yeah.
But yeah, you know what I mean. And do you does GBB have anything a bit more in depth around that course wise to talk about as well?
We do. I mean, again, it's a difficult one. There's not one answer to this. There's no silver bullet for it, which is frustrating, because what you'd like to do is say, stay in control. That's the most important thing. You know, if you are pitching or presenting, you know, particularly in a sales role, you want to stay in control and you want to be comfortable and confident. So you want to practice and you want to rehearse, and that hasn't changed, but it's become much easier. You know, how many of us ever enjoyed a training course where we got videoed doing our presentation, and then we had to watch the video back and see all the stuff we'd done wrong and listen to our voices, and guys, awful. But we also recognize that it's really effective. You know, there's nothing like seeing what I was doing with my hands, seeing where my eyes were going, hearing how I fumbled those words when I was looking for the right thing to say and how I recovered from that. Those are the things that will really help you to learn and hone that pitch and presentation. The problem is, as easy as that is to do now, because actually I can constantly see myself in the corner of the screen on the camera, you know, and I can keep checking that I'm doing things right, and my lighting's okay and all of that sort of good stuff. I ought to practice and practice and practice on Zoom to have everything really slick and to be really impressive and to be using it better than anybody else is using it. So when I get a client onto my Zoom call, I'm able to bring slides in, play video perfectly that they can hear, have the great backdrop, to all of those things. But very similar to the point with the learning platforms, that's only going to work if your client is completely comfortable with Zoom. The last thing, you've managed to find a gap in their diary, get them to agree to meet with you. You've sent them a link, but it's not a platform that they know. It's not a platform that they've used. They've struggled to download the app. You're ready to pitch, and actually you've had to turn into an IT specialist to go, oh no, hang on, I can't. Can you hear me? Can you give me a wave if you can? Oh no, oh hang on. Can you see that? Can you see my screen now? You can't, but I've practiced this 100 times. Same point as before. Best tip is to get comfortable with as many of these platforms as you possibly can, because then when the client says, I'm happy, I'm happy to take an online meeting with you, you can say, perfect, can I ask you to send me a link on whatever platform you'd prefer, whichever one you're using. Are you using Teams as a business? Do you prefer Zoom because you've got an account that you use? You send me that diary link, and then I will come onto your platform, into your environment, and present to you. That is going to be far more effective and actually much safer for you in a pitch position than trying to get the client to come to you. But it gives you the challenge of, you're now in the unfamiliar environment, you're working even harder, you're thinking, oh my God, I've never used this platform before, how do I share my screen? But actually you can immediately build a bond with that, and you can say to the customer, I'd really like to share something with you. I actually haven't used this platform very often. Is it okay if I share the screen? As you set the meeting up, do you need to give me permission to share my screen? No, okay, that's fine. Well, I think I can see the button, so you let me know when you can see. And it becomes much more relaxed, and actually they're in control of that. Again, it's a little bit back to this point that says, as a customer taking the meeting, if you've come into my office, I know I've got a battle to get rid of you. You know, if this doesn't seem worthwhile after just a couple of minutes, I've got to give you at least 20 minutes and a cup of coffee before I can get rid of you. Whereas giving the client back that control, you'll find they're much more comfortable. They don't go in with the battle of going, I've only got 20 minutes, trying to almost set up those exit routes before you even get started. They can just hang up at any time. They can fake internet issues. Done. So customers, we found, are actually far more relaxed to take these sorts of calls. And if you put them on their own platform, they'll be really quite comfortable with you. And then you can give them a really good, concise pitch, if you want to, backed up with some good visuals. And none of the rules have changed. If you were going to email it to them to read, don't share your screen and read it to them. Still email it to them. But if you've got a piece of video to show them to really illustrate your product or how it can be used, fantastic. And if you've gone to the effort of actually filming that yourself on a mobile phone or something else, and say, obviously I couldn't bring the product to you at the moment, but what I have done is I've filmed this and I've gone and done it. I think one of the great places to look at some of that innovation recently has been Shopping TV, and I've probably talked about this before. I'm slightly obsessed by Shopping TV channels.
I didn't know that.
I think there's, so you didn't know that?
No.
That's a whole different podcast. So slightly obsessed with Shopping TV, and they've done a phenomenal job of just keeping going. But so many of their presenters are working from home, and the effort that some of those people have gone to in that sales environment, and it is a pure sales environment, it's nothing else. They have set their living rooms up, they've got LED lighting in. They've done it all from stuff they can buy in Sainsbury's and IKEA in the lockdown. But they have done a brilliant job. All those slick studio sets and everything else, they're delivering over Zoom or Skype or anything else. You've got people now delivering from other countries. They're using Apple earbuds and web cameras, no other, and they're producing really slick sales TV live, 12, 15, 16 hours a day. And they're now able to use more presenters who are showing you stuff in their real homes about how it could benefit you. And look, I've put mine here, and doesn't it look great? And this is what I've done. Oh, you can see my kids' boots, in the corner there, and they absolutely love it. And
it makes it easy.
they have really embraced it. And it's that real world element that says that we're real people. We're all in this together. And now I can have more face-to-face meetings in a day than I ever could have done if I was out on the road as a rep. So let me come into your office or come into your home, be really respectful of that, but show you something good, show you in a professional way. And the best thing is I can now leave you quite comfortably by saying, look, why don't you think about it, and I'll touch base with you in a few days' time, and you'll have another face-to-face meeting. Much harder to do when you'd gone to see somebody physically and taken that time out of their diary, and as I say, minimum 20-minute appointment, or it didn't seem worth it from anybody's perspective, to say, can we do this again next week? They said, well, not really. Let me think about it. I'll get in touch with you. Much easier to get a second face-to-face meeting now.
Yeah. No, I've literally had a couple of those in the last couple of weeks where it's follow-ups.
Yeah.
And it is nice because there's usually a lot of questions after people have digested something the first time.
Yep.
To then go back and just have that second chat really helps.
And I think as a sales community, we're not necessarily recognizing this great opportunity that we've been given to have more face-to-face contact. We feel like we've been denied any face-to-face contact. But why do we want face-to-face? We want face-to-face so that we can see somebody's facial reaction. We get their body language. We can use our body language and facial expressions to the greatest effect to demonstrate to people what we're about and what we could do for them. So none of that has changed in the virtual environment.
Cool. Yeah, good answers. And I know you said there's no silver bullet to it, but there was still some things in there that hopefully people can take away from it.
Good.
Yeah. All right, last question then. Blended learning. Massive buzzword in the industry, always talked about, even more so in the past year. First of all, any insights on if it's changed much, any newer technologies you want to reference or talk about, but then also, do you think there's an ideal ratio to it, assuming that we can go back to classrooms, or if we're mixing it with face-to-face delivery online like we're doing now, chatting, is there a good ratio for e-learning and stuff you do sort of pre-course and then the classroom parts?
Yeah, I mean, Mackenzie, I'm not big on putting, finite numbers on these things, because we like to look at each project individually and say what is right for this topic, what is right for this client, what's right for the audience. So the key in there is in the title, isn't it? It's got to be blended. The whole point of doing blended is not just to hit the buzzword. The point of doing blended is that it allows you to use a mix of mediums which is more engaging in itself. It allows you to get more engagement time with the learner with less budget. And most importantly, and the biggest win for blended learning, is that it extends the period of learning. So it takes a 1-day traditional training course out to 6 to 9 weeks input for us. And that's absolutely genuine. Where, in traditionally, somebody might have come on a time management course. Let's use that as a good example. And they would go to the classroom for a day, and they would get, some really good input on things that they could do differently that would have an impact on the way that they are managing their time and therefore how productive they're being. What people did with that knowledge, we had really no control over. So we could stand behind our content any day of the week and say they got everything they needed to go away and make a change and see an improvement. But more than that, I can't tell you. Now, with a blended approach, we can say, well, you know what, let's split up the learning key moments, and we quite often use, that good solid grow coaching model to illustrate that says there will be an element of the training where people are setting goals and objectives. We need to have some time where we recognize their reality and we learn from them, and they are able to talk about what they do at the moment that isn't working. Our role as a training agency is to then give them the options, all the different things that they could do. So that's where the learning comes in, some different views, some different ways of tackling things, some new models to apply, some new techniques to try. The will to go away and do it, we can be as motivational as we can, and we can dedicate a bit of time in a face-to-face training session to action planning and setting actions to take away, but that's where it finishes. With a blended approach, we could split that up, and we can say, well, actually, we can have some contact with this person way ahead of that face-to-face intervention, whether that's happening in a virtual classroom or a face-to-face classroom. We can start to set context, perhaps by delivering them some video content, so they can start thinking about the topic and what it means to them, and what it would mean to them if they could change some of the things they were doing. We can actually get that feedback from them through an interactive platform where they can start to communicate with their facilitator ahead of the training, saying, this is the biggest issue that I've got at the moment. This is what I'd really like to get out of this day. And we can make sure that it's going to work for them. We can engage them with their reality through some e-learning, where they actually get to think about, which of these things apply to me. They can do some, perhaps behavioral profiling about how they tackle different topics, some of the stuff that would just take up time in a face-to-face classroom. They can do that online. We can see the results. They can get the results back. This is what I'm doing at the moment. This is how I'm behaving. We can have done the introductions. We can learn a bit about them. They can learn a bit about us. They can get that delivered straight to a mobile phone. We can start to engage them in a learning portal where they can see who else is going to be on the program. They can exchange messages. They can start to build a bit of a community. And we certainly do that through our learning portal. The LMS that sits behind that has that real kind of community feel to it. Who am I going to be working with? Then we can do just that options piece in the classroom that says, right, let's pull this apart for a whole day, face to face, all that interactivity and engagement that we've talked about. And so from a couple of weeks work beforehand, thinking about the training, engaging with it, looking forward to finding out what they can do to help me with all this stuff that now I've really crystallized, what is my issue? Why do I need this training? Now I come to the classroom really ready to learn to change those things. I've already decided I don't want to go back to that old way. Get all that new information, do the action planning, but now we can follow up. We can have those one-to-one coaching sessions really affordably, really conveniently, really timely, We can talk to somebody while they're at their desk at the point that they need it. We have instant messaging systems as part of the blended program, so that actually they can get in touch with us as a training center and go, look, we looked at something in the classroom, now I can't find my notes on it, but I really want to use it today. Well, that's fun. Send us an instant chat over the website and we'll send you that slide, or we'll send you that element of the course again if you've lost it. Or we can even, have a quick chat with you and say, well, let us help you plan that as part of your coaching support at the end of this. And at the very least, we can check back in with somebody, at 2-week intervals over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and say, how are you getting on with that? How have those actions come on? Now that you're out of the classroom and you're trying to apply it, is it working for you? Well, let me talk you through how you might want to tweak that a little bit, or how you could apply it, or what you could say in that situation. And we can really help somebody to embed it. And then a point we were making earlier in the conversation about the measurement becomes really easy. I'm collecting anecdotal evidence as I'm having those conversations where someone's saying, well, I tried it like this and this is what happened. So then I tried it like this and now it's really working for me. Okay, well, how do you know it's working? And then they will tell you about the difference that they've made in their business. And you can collect that as the measurement of the success of the program. So the blended program, I don't think there's any right or wrong ratio, honestly, because depending on the role, depending on the topic, it could be right to have 10 15-minute videos that somebody watches over the course of 6 months before they come on a piece of face-to-face. In another situation, it might be absolutely right that you start with the face-to-face and you're just doing the follow-up piece. Others, the face-to-face sits slap bang in the middle and you've got some pre-work and you've got some post-work and some coaching and some follow-up. Really doesn't matter. What is the best use of the individual's time, and what will drop them the right sized chunks of learning that they can go away and apply, see the difference it's making, and then your engagement just goes up and up and up. I don't have to wait till the end of the program to start to see the result. From the first video that I watched, I was glad I was enrolled on this course, because that looked like it was going to be really useful, even though I've got to wait another 2 weeks. But it's already started me thinking that I might be able to do this and I might be able to do that. I might even start to have a go with some of that on my own before I get to the training course. And then I come armed with some really relevant examples. So yeah, it's those clients that are embracing that are seeing huge benefits.
Awesome. Thank you. I think there's loads of food for thought in all that, for sure. Well, there we are. Believe it or not, we've got through all of the questions that I had. So yeah, thanks again for that.
Not at all. Thank you.
In that. But yeah, so people watching in, go and check out Tim and GBB Coaching Consultancy if you gain value from any of that and you want to find out more. Just pop them into Google. They should show up because we've helped them with their SEO and their website and their ads. So all being well, they'll come up quite quickly. But yeah, cool. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you soon with another podcast.
Thanks very much.